Lieutenant Maya Chen stood at the back of the briefing room, her small frame almost hidden behind the taller officers who had gathered for the morning strategy session. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow on the faces of men and women who had spent years climbing the ranks of the United Earth Defense Force. Maya had been with the force for only 3 years, and every day she felt the weight of being the youngest officer in her division. Admiral Harrison stood at the front of the room, his silver hair catching the light as he pointed to the holographic map floating above the central table. The map showed the Kepler sector, a region of space that had become a battleground between humanity and the Vorthan Empire. The Vorthans had appeared 10 years ago, their massive warships emerging from the darkness between stars like nightmares made real. They were taller than humans, their skin a deep blue that seemed to absorb light, and their eyes were solid black orbs that revealed nothing of their thoughts or feelings. "We've lost contact with Station Gamma 7, Admiral Harrison said, his voice heavy with concern. "The Vorthans hit them hard 3 days ago. We believe there may be survivors, but our main fleet is engaged near the Orion Belt and cannot divert resources." Maya listened carefully, her mind already working through the possibilities. Station Gamma 7 was a small outpost, home to maybe 200 people, mostly scientists and support staff. It sat on the edge of human-controlled space, a lonely beacon in the vast darkness. She had visited the station once during a supply run and remembered the faces of the people who lived and worked there. Dr. Patel, the elderly botanist who was trying to grow Earth vegetables in artificial soil. Young Tommy Nguyen, barely 18, who had taken a job as a maintenance worker to save money for his sister's education back on Earth. "Sir," said Commander Williams, a tall man with broad shoulders and a voice that carried easily across the room, "I propose we send a strike force to assess the situation." "My team can handle it." Admiral Harrison nodded slowly. "I was thinking the same thing. But we need to be careful. Intelligence suggests the Vorthans have left a small patrol in the area. Nothing major, maybe 2 or 3 scout ships." Maya raised her hand, her heart beating faster. She rarely spoke in these meetings, preferring to observe and learn. But something about this mission felt different. She had an idea, one that had been forming in her mind since she first heard about the station's situation. "Sir," she said, her voice coming out quieter than she intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Sir, I have a suggestion." The room fell silent. Officers turned to look at her, and Maya felt her cheeks grow warm under their gaze. Some of them smiled in a way that was not entirely kind. Commander Williams raised an eyebrow. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, "I wasn't aware you were part of the tactical planning team." "I'm not, sir," Maya replied, standing a little straighter. "But I've been studying Vorthan patrol patterns in my spare time. I've noticed something that might help us." Admiral Harrison held up a hand to silence the murmurs that had broken out around the room. "Let her speak," he said. Maya stepped forward, moving past the other officers until she stood near the holographic map. Her hands trembled slightly as she manipulated the display, pulling up data she had compiled over the past several months. "The Vorthans are creatures of habit," she began. "Their patrol routes follow predictable patterns, especially in areas they consider already conquered. They rotate their scout ships every 18 hours, and there's a window of about 45 minutes during each rotation when the coverage is minimal." She pointed to a section of the map near Station Gamma 7. "If we time our approach correctly, we can slip past their patrols without being detected. A small team, maybe just 1 or 2 ships, moving fast and quiet." Commander Williams laughed, a short bark of sound that echoed in the silent room. "With all due respect, Lieutenant, that's a fantasy. The Vorthans aren't stupid. They wouldn't leave such an obvious gap in their defenses." "But they would," Maya insisted, her voice growing stronger. "They're not expecting us to attack. They think they've won this sector. Their patrol patterns are designed to watch for fleeing ships, not incoming ones. They're looking outward, not inward." Several officers chuckled. Captain Rodriguez, a veteran of a dozen battles against the Vorthans, shook his head. "Chen, you're young. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but war isn't something you learn from data alone. Those patterns you're seeing? They could be coincidence. Or worse, they could be a trap. Maya felt her confidence wavering, but she pressed on. I've analyzed 6 months of data, sir. The pattern holds every single time. I'm not saying it's without risk, but I believe it's our best chance of reaching the station without engaging in a full-scale battle. Admiral Harrison studied the data she had projected, his expression thoughtful. For a moment, Maya dared to hope that he might listen, that he might see what she saw. But then, he sighed and shook his head. I appreciate your initiative, Lieutenant Chen, he said, but Commander Williams' approach is more in line with standard protocol. We'll send a strike force through the main approach vector. Overwhelming force is the safest option when dealing with an unknown situation. Maya opened her mouth to argue, but the look on the Admiral's face told her the discussion was over. She nodded, stepped back, and returned to her place at the back of the room. As she walked, she heard whispers from the officers around her. Someone should tell her to stick to supply manifests. Did you see the look on William's face? I thought he was going to burst out laughing. Poor thing. She'll learn eventually that the real world doesn't work like her simulations. Maya kept her expression neutral, but, inside, something hardened. She had faced this kind of dismissal her entire career. Too young. Too inexperienced. Too eager to prove herself. She had learned to let the comments roll off her back, to focus on her work and wait for the chance to show what she could do. But this time felt different. This time, lives were at stake. The meeting ended, and officers filed out of the room, their conversations already moving on to other topics. Maya lingered, pretending to study the holographic map while her mind raced. She couldn't shake the feeling that Commander Williams' direct approach was wrong. The Vorthans would see them coming. They would be ready. As she stood there, lost in thought, a voice spoke from behind her. Lieutenant Chen. Maya turned to find Admiral Harrison standing a few feet away, his hands clasped behind his back. The room had emptied, and they were alone. Sir, she said, snapping to attention. The Admiral waved his hand dismissively. At ease. I wanted to speak with you privately. He moved closer to the map, his eyes scanning the data she had compiled. Your analysis is impressive. Where did you learn to do this? Self-taught, sir, Maya replied. I've always been interested in pattern recognition. Before I joined the Defense Force, I worked in logistics optimization. Finding the most efficient routes, predicting supply chain disruptions, that sort of thing. Harrison nodded slowly. And you applied those skills to studying the enemy? Yes, sir. I thought it might be useful someday. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than before. I'm not sending you on this mission, Lieutenant. You understand that, don't you? Maya felt a flicker of disappointment but kept her expression steady. I understand, sir. Good. Harrison turned to face her directly. But I want you to continue your analysis. Keep studying those patrol patterns. If you're right about this, it could change how we approach the entire war. And if you're wrong. He paused. Well, we'll deal with that when we come to it. He left the room without another word, and Maya stood alone with the glowing map. She watched the simulated Vorthan patrol routes trace their paths through the holographic stars, and she knew with a certainty that surprised her that she was right. The pattern was there. The opportunity was real. 3 days later, she learned that Commander Williams' strike force had been ambushed. Of the 12 ships he had led into the sector, only 4 returned. The survivors reported that the Vorthans had been waiting for them, their warships hidden in the shadow of a nearby asteroid field. It had been a massacre. Station Gamma 7 remained out of reach, its survivors, if there were any, left to fend for themselves. Maya was in the mess hall when she heard the news. She set down her fork, her appetite gone, and stared at the table in front of her. Around her, other officers were discussing the disaster in hushed voices. Some blamed intelligence failures. Others blamed bad luck. No one blamed Commander Williams, who had died leading the charge against the Vorthan ambush. Terrible thing, said a voice beside her. Maya looked up to find Captain Rodriguez sliding into the seat across from her. His face was tired, his eyes red-rimmed. She remembered that he and Williams had been friends. I'm sorry for your loss, Captain, she said. Rodriguez nodded, his jaw tight. He was a good man. A good soldier. He was quiet for a moment, then looked at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read. You know, after the briefing the other day, Williams came to me. He was angry. Said you had embarrassed him in front of the Admiral. Maya felt her stomach drop. I didn't mean to. I know you didn't, Rodriguez interrupted. But, here's the thing, Chen. Looking back at it now, with what we know about how the ambush happened. He shook his head. I keep thinking about what you said. About the patrol patterns. About timing our approach. Sir? Rodriguez leaned forward, lowering his voice. Williams went in through the main approach vector, just like we always do. Standard protocol. But, the Vorthans knew we'd do that. They were ready. He paused. I'm not saying your plan would have worked. I'm not saying anything would have worked. But, I am saying that maybe we should have listened. He stood up, straightening his uniform. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, I won't laugh at your ideas again. He walked away, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. She sat in the mess hall for a long time, watching officers come and go, listening to the hum of the ship around her. The weight of what had happened pressed down on her, heavier than anything she had ever felt. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, and thought about Dr. Patel and Tommy Nguyen and all the others on Station Gamma 7. Were they still alive? Were they waiting for rescue that would never come? At 0300 hours, she made a decision. She got up, dressed in civilian clothes she rarely wore, and made her way to the docking bay. The ship she served on, the UES Resolute, carried several small transport shuttles used for supply runs and personnel transfers. They were lightly armed and not designed for combat, but they were fast and maneuverable. Maya had access to the shuttles as part of her logistics duties. She knew the security codes, the patrol schedules, and the gaps in surveillance coverage. Getting to one of the shuttles without being noticed would be difficult but not impossible. Her heart pounded as she moved through the corridors, avoiding the occasional crew member heading to or from their shift. Every shadow seemed to hide a watching eye, and every sound made her flinch. What she was doing was insane. It was against every regulation, every rule she had sworn to follow. If she was caught, she would be court-martialed. Her career would be over. But she kept moving. The docking bay was quiet when she arrived. The night shift consisted of only 2 technicians, and they were both focused on maintenance work on the far side of the bay. Maya slipped between rows of parked vehicles, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper on the metal floor. Shuttle 7 was her target. It was the oldest of the transports, scheduled for decommissioning in a few months. It was also the least monitored, its systems not connected to the main network like the newer models. Maya had chosen it specifically for these reasons. She reached the shuttle and paused, her hand on the access panel. This was it. The point of no return. Once she opened that door and stepped inside, there was no going back. She thought about the officers who had laughed at her in the briefing room. She thought about Commander Williams, dead because no one would listen to a different approach. She thought about the 200 people on Station Gamma 7, waiting in the darkness for help that might never come. Maya entered the access code and stepped inside. The shuttle's interior was cramped and utilitarian, designed for function rather than comfort. Maya settled into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence, her fingers moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. The engines hummed to life, a low vibration that she could feel through the deck plating. An alert flashed on the console. Someone in the bay had noticed the shuttle powering up. She had maybe 2 minutes before security arrived. Maya worked faster, bypassing safety protocols and disabling the shuttle's tracking beacon. When the bay doors began to open, she was ready. She lifted off, the shuttle's thrusters flaring bright in the darkness, and shot through the opening before anyone could stop her. Behind her, alarms began to wail. Voices crackled over the comm system, demanding that she identify herself, ordering her to return immediately. Maya switched off the comm and focused on the stars ahead. She was committed now. Whatever happened next, she would face it alone. The journey to the Kepler sector would take 18 hours at maximum speed. Maya spent the first few hours watching her sensors for any sign of pursuit, but the Resolute didn't follow. Either they had decided she wasn't worth chasing, or they had more pressing concerns. She suspected it was the latter. With the loss of William's strike force, the fleet had bigger problems than one missing shuttle. She used the time to review her data, double-checking her calculations and refining her approach vector. The patrol gap she had identified would open in approximately 16 hours. If her timing was perfect, she could slip through undetected and reach the station. If she was off by even a few minutes, the Vorthan scouts would spot her and that would be the end. Maya tried not to think about that possibility. Instead, she focused on the details, the numbers, the patterns that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. 12 hours into the journey, she detected something on her sensors that made her blood run cold. A Vorthan warship, larger than anything she had expected, was patrolling the edge of the sector. It wasn't one of the scouts she had anticipated. This was a cruiser, heavily armed and capable of destroying her shuttle with a single shot. Maya's first instinct was to turn around. The cruiser changed everything. Her calculations hadn't accounted for a ship that size in this area. But, as she studied the sensor data more carefully, she noticed something interesting. The cruiser was moving on a fixed path, following a route that would take it away from Station Gamma 7 in approximately 4 hours. She ran the numbers again. If she adjusted her approach and delayed her arrival by 2 hours, she could avoid the cruiser entirely. It would tighten the window for getting through the patrol gap, but it was still possible. Maya made the adjustment and continued on her course. As the hours passed, she found herself thinking about home. About her parents in their small apartment in Hong Kong, who had been so proud when she joined the Defense Force. About her younger brother, David, who was studying to be a doctor and who sent her messages every week full of terrible jokes and updates about his life. About the friends she had left behind, the dreams she had once had of exploring the stars in peace rather than in war. She wondered if she would ever see any of them again. 16 hours and 43 minutes after leaving the Resolute, Maya Chan reached the edge of the Kepler sector. The patrol gap was opening, just as she had predicted. She could see the Vorthan scout ships on her sensors, 2 of them moving in opposite directions as they completed their rotation. The window was narrow. She had maybe 30 minutes to get through before the next patrol arrived. Maya pushed the shuttle's engines to their limit, coaxing every bit of speed from the aging vessel. The stars blurred around her as she dove into the gap, her eyes fixed on the sensor display, watching the positions of the enemy ships with laser focus. 20 minutes. The scouts were out of range. So far, so good. 15 minutes. She was halfway through. The station was visible on her long-range sensors now, a tiny blip against the vast darkness. 10 minutes. Something was wrong. One of the scouts had changed course. It was turning back, moving faster than she had anticipated. Maya's hands tightened on the controls. She was so close. The station was right there, just a few thousand kilometers away. But the scout was closing the gap, its sensors sweeping the area where she was hiding. She had to make a choice. She could try to outrun the scout and hope she reached the station before it spotted her. Or she could find somewhere to hide and wait for another opportunity. There was no time to analyze, no time to run the numbers. Maya went with her instinct. She cut the engines, powered down every non-essential system, and let the shuttle drift on its momentum alone. Without its active system's broadcasting signals, the shuttle would be almost invisible to Vorthan sensors. Almost. The scout passed within 50 kilometers of her position. Maya held her breath, watching the sensor ghost on her display, counting the seconds. If they spotted her, if they decided to investigate, she would have no way to escape.
The scout continued on its way. Maya waited until it was completely out of range before she allowed herself to breathe again.
Then, she powered up the engines and made the final approach to Station Gamma 7. What she found there broke her heart. The station was dark, its lights extinguished, its hull scarred by weapons fire. As she circled closer, she could see the damage more clearly: breaches in the outer sections, debris floating in the vacuum, the twisted remains of defense systems that had failed to protect the people inside. But there were signs of life too. A few sections still had power, their emergency lights glowing faintly through the viewports. And, as Maya scanned the station with her shuttle's sensors, she picked up something that made her heart leap. Life signs. Dozens of them, clustered in the station's central core. There were survivors. Maya docked at the only airlock that seemed to be functional, her shuttle settling against the station's hull with a gentle thump. She suited up, checking her helmet seal 3 times before she was satisfied, and cycled through the airlock into the station. The inside was worse than the outside. The corridors were dark except for the red glow of emergency lighting. The air was thin and cold, recycled by backup systems running on minimal power. Maya moved carefully, her footsteps echoing in the silence, following the life signs toward the center of the station. She found them in the main atrium, a large open space that had once been used for community gatherings. Nearly 100 people were huddled there, wrapped in blankets and emergency thermal sheets. Their faces were pale and drawn, their eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. And, standing among them, trying to organize the distribution of the last of the emergency rations, was Dr. Patel. The old botanist looked up as Maya entered. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Then, his face crumpled, and tears began to stream down his weathered cheeks. "You came," he whispered.
"Someone actually came." Maya moved forward, her throat tight. "I'm Lieutenant Chen, United Earth Defense Force. I'm here to help."
The next few hours were a blur of activity. Maya learned that the Vorthons had attacked without warning, their ships emerging from hyperspace and opening fire before the station could even raise its shields. The outer sections had been devastated in the first few minutes, and dozens of people had died. The survivors had retreated to the central core, sealing themselves in and hoping that help would arrive. That had been 5 days ago. The station's supplies were almost exhausted. Another day or two, and they would have started dying. "We tried to send distress signals," Dr. Patel explained, "but the Vorthons jammed everything. We could see their ships circling, watching us. I think they wanted us to suffer." Maya nodded grimly. "The Vorthons don't take prisoners. They consider it a waste of resources." She had learned this during her studies, but hearing it confirmed by someone who had experienced their cruelty firsthand made it more real, more terrible. "How did you get through?" asked a young woman with a bandaged arm. "They've been watching every approach." Maya hesitated. How could she explain that she had stolen a shuttle and flown here against orders, using a theory that her own commanders had laughed at? How could she tell these frightened people that she was here essentially as a fugitive? "I found a gap in their patrols," she said finally. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. Dr. Patel studied her with shrewd eyes. "You came alone," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Does anyone else know you're here?" Maya thought about the Resolute, probably still wondering where she had gone. She thought about Admiral Harrison and Captain Rodriguez and all the others who had dismissed her ideas as fantasy. "No," she admitted. "No one knows I'm here." The survivors exchanged glances. Maya could see the hope draining from their faces, replaced by a new despair. One shuttle, one pilot, what difference could that make against the Vorthons who still circle outside? But, before anyone could speak, Tomingwin pushed his way through the crowd. The young maintenance worker looked different from the last time Maya had seen him. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a long cut on his forehead that had been clumsily bandaged. But there was fire in his gaze, a determination that refused to be extinguished. "One person got through," he said, his voice carrying across the silent atrium. "That means it's possible."
If one person can make it, then others can too. We just need to hold on a little longer. Maya looked at him and felt something shift inside her. He was right. She had proven that her theory worked. Now she just had to find a way to share that proof with someone who could actually mount a rescue. But, first, she had to keep these people alive. Here's what we're going to do, she said, surprised by the confidence in her own voice.
My shuttle has supplies, not much, but enough to buy us some time.
We'll ration everything carefully.
Meanwhile, I'll work on getting a signal through the Vorthen jamming. If I can contact the fleet, they can send a proper rescue mission.
And, if you can't, someone asked. Maya met the question head-on. Then, I'll find another way. I didn't come all this way just to give up.
The work began immediately. Maya distributed the supplies from her shuttle, carefully calculating how long they could make everything last. The survivors organized themselves into teams, following her directions with a willingness born of desperation. For the first time in days, they had purpose. They had hope. And, as she labored alongside them, Maya-chan realized something that would change her forever.
Leadership wasn't about rank or experience or the approval of others. It was about stepping up when no one else would.
It was about finding a way forward when every door seemed closed. She had been laughed at by her own side. But, here, among these survivors, she was something else entirely. She was their only chance.
The first night on the station was the longest of Maya's life.
She worked until her eyes burned and her hands shook, trying to boost the station's damaged communication array enough to punch through the Vorthen jamming. The equipment was old and the damage was extensive, but she refused to give up. At some point during the night, Dr. Patel appeared at her side with a cup of something warm.
It's not really tea, he said apologetically. Just hot water with some dried herbs I was growing in my lab. But, it's better than nothing.
Maya accepted it gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around the cup.
Thank you, Dr. Patel.
The old man sat down beside her, his joints creaking with the effort. You know, he said conversationally, when I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut. I dreamed of exploring new worlds, discovering new forms of life.
He gestured at the damaged equipment around them. This isn't quite what I imagined.
Maya smiled despite herself.
Things rarely turn out the way we imagine. No, they don't.
Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment.
But, sometimes they turn out better.
I never became an astronaut, but I became a scientist. I spent my life studying how things grow, how life finds a way even in the harshest conditions.
He looked at Maya with warm eyes.
You remind me of my plants, Lieutenant.
Your plants?
Yes. I have a species of moss that can survive almost anything: radiation, extreme temperatures, lack of nutrients. Other scientists said it was impossible for anything to grow under such conditions.
But, the moss didn't know it was impossible, so it grew anyway. He smiled. You're like that moss, Lieutenant Chen. You didn't know you couldn't make it here alone, so you came anyway. Maya didn't know what to say.
She stared at her cup of not-quite tea and felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Get some rest, Dr. Patel said gently.
You've done enough for one night.
Tomorrow will bring new challenges, and you'll need your strength. She wanted to argue, to say that she couldn't stop while there was still work to be done. But, her body was screaming for sleep, and she knew he was right. She found a quiet corner, wrapped herself in a thermal blanket, and closed her eyes. Sleep came quickly, and, with it, dreams of home.
She woke to alarms.
Maya was on her feet before she was fully conscious, her training taking over. The station's remaining sensors had detected movement Vorthen ships, 3 of them, moving toward the station on an intercept course. They must have spotted my shuttle when I docked, Maya said, her mind racing. Or maybe they've just decided it's time to finish what they started. The survivors gathered around her, their faces pale with fear. Some of the children were crying, and their parents held them close, whispering words of comfort that no one really believed. Maya looked at them and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. These people were counting on her. They had trusted her to save them, and now the enemy was coming. She had no weapons worth mentioning. Her shuttle was small and slow compared to Vorthan ships. She had no training in combat, no experience in warfare beyond what she had read in books and simulations. But she had something else. She had spent months studying the Vorthans, learning their patterns, understanding how they thought. She knew things about them that most military officers never bothered to learn. And she had an idea. "Everyone, stay calm," she said, her voice cutting through the panic. "I have a plan." The plan was insane. Maya knew that. But it was also the only option she had. She had noticed something during her studies of Vorthan communication patterns. They had a protocol for accepting surrender. Unlike human forces, which typically captured enemy personnel for intelligence and prisoner exchange, the Vorthans viewed surrender as a transaction. If you offered them something of value, they would spare your life. Not out of mercy, but out of pragmatism. The question was, what could she offer them? Maya thought about the station, about the survivors, about the shuttle sitting in the docking bay. And then, she thought about something else, the data she had collected on Vorthan patrol patterns. It was valuable information, the kind of intelligence that could save lives. But it could also help the Vorthans if it fell into their hands. Unless she gave them the wrong data. The idea crystallized in her mind. She would offer the Vorthans false information, convincing enough to seem real, but subtly altered to lead them into traps. It was risky. If they detected the deception, they would kill everyone. But if it worked, she might buy enough time for a rescue to arrive. "I need everyone to help me," she announced. "We're going to send the Vorthans a message." The message was simple: "I am Lieutenant Maya Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. I have valuable intelligence regarding human military operations. I am willing to negotiate." She sent it on an open frequency, making sure the approaching ships could receive it. Then, she waited. The response came faster than she expected. A harsh, synthesized voice filled the station's speakers. The Vorthans had accepted her communication. "Human Chen," the voice said, "state your offer." Maya took a deep breath. "I have detailed information on United Earth Defense Force patrol patterns, supply routes, and communication codes. This information is current and accurate. In exchange for this data, I request safe passage for myself and the survivors on this station." There was a long pause. Maya could feel the eyes of everyone in the atrium on her, but she kept her focus on the communication console. Finally, the voice spoke again. "Your offer is received. We will consider. Remain at current position." The communication ended. Maya slumped against the console, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples. "Did it work?" Tommy Nguyen asked. "I don't know yet," Maya admitted. "But we bought some time. That's something." The next few hours were agony. The Vorthan ships held their position, neither advancing nor retreating. Maya used the time to refine her false data, making it as convincing as possible while ensuring that any fleet following her patrol patterns would fly straight into ambushes. She also discovered something unexpected. While working on the communication array, she had accidentally tapped into a Vorthan frequency. The enemy ships were talking to each other, and, while she couldn't understand their language, she could record their transmissions. "This could be important," she muttered, saving everything she could capture. "Even if we don't survive, this data could help others." Dr. Patel watched her work with growing admiration. "You're thinking about the future," he observed. "Even now, facing death, you're trying to help people you've never met." "It's all I can do," Maya said. "I can't control whether we live or die. But I can control what I leave behind." The old scientist nodded slowly. "You really are remarkable, Lieutenant Chen." Before Maya could respond, the communication console crackled to life. The Vorthan voice returned, and, this time, it carried something she hadn't expected. "Human Chen," it said. "Your offer is accepted. You will prepare data for transfer. In exchange, survivors will be released unharmed." Maya felt a surge of hope, but she forced herself to remain calm.
I will need assurances, she said. How do I know you'll keep your word? Another pause.
Then, Vorthan Empire does not deceive.
Deception is inefficient.
You have our word.
It was strange, Maya thought.
For all their brutality, the Vorthans seemed to have a code of honor, at least when it came to negotiations.
She filed that information away for future use.
I'll prepare the data, she said.
But I want to deliver it in person.
I want to see the survivors leave safely before I hand anything over.
Acceptable, the voice replied.
You will approach lead ship in your shuttle. Survivors will depart in escape pods. Exchange will occur simultaneously. Maya ended the communication and turned to face the survivors. Their expressions were a mixture of hope and fear, trust and doubt.
It's happening, she told them. We're getting out of here.
The escape pods were ancient and cramped, designed for emergency evacuation rather than comfort.
But they worked. One by one, the survivors filed into them until only Maya and a handful of others remained in the atrium. You're really doing this, Tommy Nguyen said.
He had insisted on being one of the last to leave.
You're going to face them alone.
Someone has to, Maya replied.
And I started this. I should finish it. Tommy shook his head. You know what I think?
I think the people who laughed at you back on your ship are idiots. You've done more in the past 2 days than they've done in years.
Maya managed a small smile. Thanks, Tommy. Now get in the pod.
He went, reluctantly, and Maya watched as the last of the escape pods launched toward open space, away from the Vorthan ships.
She had done it.
The survivors were safe.
Now came the hard part.
Maya returned to her shuttle, settled into the pilot's seat, and began the slow approach toward the lead Vorthan ship. As she flew, she couldn't help but marvel at the size of the vessel. It dwarfed her tiny shuttle like a whale beside a minnow. A docking bay opened on the side of the ship, and a guide beam pulled her shuttle inside. When she stepped out of the airlock, she found herself surrounded by Vorthan soldiers.
They were even more imposing up close.
Their blue skin seemed to shimmer in the artificial light, and their black eyes tracked her every movement with unnerving intensity. Each one stood at least 7 feet tall, their bodies encased in armor that looked like it could shrug off most human weapons. One of them stepped forward, the commander, Maya guessed, based on the markings on his armor. Human Shen, he said, and she was surprised to find that his voice was different from the synthesized one she had heard over the communication channel. Deeper, more resonant, almost musical.
You are smaller than expected. Maya straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated. Size isn't everything. The commander made a sound that might have been a laugh.
True. Your audacity compensates.
No human has ever approached Vorthan ship alone.
You are either very brave or very foolish.
Maybe both, Maya admitted.
The commander studied her for a long moment. Then, he gestured, and one of the soldiers brought forward a data tablet. Your intelligence, he said.
Transfer now. Maya hesitated. This was the moment of truth.
She had prepared false data, information designed to mislead and harm the Vorthans if they tried to use it. But handing it over still felt like a betrayal, even if the betrayal was itself a deception.
She made the transfer.
The commander examined the data, his black eyes flickering as he processed the information.
Maya held her breath, waiting for him to detect the falsifications, waiting for the killing blow.
Instead, he nodded slowly.
This is comprehensive.
Useful. I told you I had valuable intelligence, Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. The commander looked at her again, and this time his expression seemed almost approving.
You did. And you delivered. This is good.
Vorthan Empire respects those who honor their agreements. He turned and spoke to his soldiers in their own language. Maya couldn't understand the words, but she watched as they reacted with surprise, their attention shifting to her with new interest. When the commander turned back, his voice carried a weight that Maya didn't fully understand.
Human Chen, he said. You have done something that no human has ever done. You approached us without fear. You negotiated with honor. You protected your people.
I was just trying to survive, Maya said.
No.
The commander shook his head.
You were leading. Your people followed you, trusted you.
Even your enemies, he gestured at himself, respect you.
Maya didn't know what to say.
She had expected many things from this encounter: death, imprisonment, torture, but not this.
Not respect.
The commander continued. In Vorthan culture, we have a title for leaders who earn our acknowledgement. It is not given lightly.
It has never been given to a human.
He paused, and, when he spoke again, his voice resonated with a formal gravity. From this day, you are known to the Vorthan Empire as Commander Chen.
This title brings certain privileges. No Vorthan soldier will harm you without direct order from Imperial Command.
You have earned our recognition. Maya stared at him, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing.
The Vorthans were naming her a junior lieutenant whose own side had laughed at her ideas as a commander?
I don't understand, she said.
Why?
The commander tilted his head, a gesture that seemed almost human.
Because you are worthy of it. Because in the heat of crisis, you became what your people needed. Your rank is irrelevant. Your actions define you.
He stepped aside, revealing a clear path back to her shuttle.
Go, Commander Chen. Return to your fleet. Tell them what you have learned here.
And, know that the Vorthan Empire will be watching.
Maya walked back to her shuttle in a daze.
She climbed inside, sealed the hatch, and initiated the launch sequence. As she flew away from the Vorthan ship, she looked back at the massive vessel and saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. The Vorthan commander was standing at the edge of the docking bay, watching her go.
And, unless she was imagining it, he was saluting.
She returned the gesture before turning her shuttle toward home. Behind her, the survivors were safe, heading toward the edge of the sector where rescue ships would eventually find them. Above her, the stars waited, cold and uncaring, witnesses to the small drama that had played out in their light.
And, inside her chest, Maya Chen felt something new growing.
Not pride, exactly, and not confidence.
Something deeper. Something that would take time to fully understand. She was no longer the junior lieutenant that everyone laughed at. She was Commander Chen.
And this was only the beginning. The journey back to United Earthspace took Maya Chen 3 days. Her shuttle was running on reserve fuel, its engines pushed beyond their design limits during the escape from the Kepler sector. She spent most of that time in a strange state between exhaustion and hyper-awareness, her mind replaying the events on the Vorthan ship over and over again.
Commander Chen.
The title felt heavy on her shoulders, like a coat that didn't quite fit. She had gone to Station Gamma 7 as a disgraced junior officer, someone who had stolen military property and disobeyed direct orders. She was returning as something else entirely, though what exactly that something was, she couldn't quite say. On the second day of her journey, she received a transmission from the UES Resolute.
Admiral Harrison's voice filled the cramped shuttle, tight with barely contained emotion.
Lieutenant Chen, he said, and Maya noticed that he used her old rank, not the one the Vorthans had given her.
You are ordered to proceed directly to Starbase Delta 9 upon arrival in United Earthspace.
You will be met by military police and escorted to a debriefing facility.
Do you understand these instructions? Maya keyed her communication channel. Understood, Admiral. I'm heading there now.
There was a pause before Harrison spoke again, and, when he did, his voice was different, softer, almost uncertain.
The survivors from Gamma 7 arrived safely. All 94 of them. They're telling quite a story about you, Lieutenant. Maya didn't know how to respond to that.
I just did what needed to be done, sir. We'll discuss what you did when you arrive.
Another pause. Harrison out.
The communication ended, leaving Maya alone with the hum of her shuttle's failing systems and the weight of her thoughts. Starbase Delta 9 was a massive structure, one of the largest military installations in United Earth space. It served as a hub for fleet operations, a training center for new recruits, and, Maya knew from experience, a holding facility for officers awaiting court-martial. When she docked, she found exactly what Admiral Harrison had promised. 2 military police officers were waiting for her at the airlock, their faces impassive and professional. "Lieutenant Chen," one of them said, "please come with us." Maya went without resistance. She was too tired to fight, and, besides, she had expected this. What she had done, stealing a shuttle, disobeying orders, flying into enemy territory alone, would have consequences. She had known that from the moment she stepped onto Shuttle 7 back on the Resolute. The officers led her through winding corridors to a secure section of the starbase. They passed checkpoints and security doors, going deeper into the heart of the facility until they reached a small room with a single table and 2 chairs. "Wait here," the officer said. "Someone will be with you shortly." Maya sat down and waited. The room was deliberately uncomfortable, the chair was hard, the temperature was slightly too cool, and the lights were bright enough to make her eyes ache. Standard interrogation tactics, designed to keep a suspect off balance. Maya recognized them from her training, but knowing what they were didn't make them any less effective. She was starting to doze off when the door opened. Admiral Harrison entered, followed by 2 people Maya didn't recognize, a woman in civilian clothes with sharp eyes and a datapad, and a man in an admiral's uniform whose chest was covered in medals and ribbons. Maya stood and saluted. "Sirs." "Ma'am." Admiral Harrison gestured for her to sit back down. "At ease, Lieutenant." "This is Admiral Chen," he paused, seeming to realize the coincidence of the names. "No relation, I assume." "He's the commander of the 3rd Fleet. And this is Director Sarah Wells, from Military Intelligence." Maya nodded at each of them in turn. "Thank you for seeing me." Admiral Chen, the other Admiral Chen, leaned forward, his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made Maya feel like she was being dissected. "Lieutenant, do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, sir. I stole a military vessel and flew it into enemy-controlled space without authorization. I'm prepared to accept the consequences of my actions." "Is that all?" Director Wells asked, her voice neutral. Maya hesitated. "I also made contact with the enemy. I shared intelligence with them in exchange for the safety of the survivors on Station Gamma 7. The room went very quiet. Admiral Chen's expression hardened, and Admiral Harrison looked down at the table, his jaw tight. "You shared intelligence with the Vorthans," Admiral Chen repeated slowly. "Would you care to explain what kind of intelligence?" Maya told them. She explained her plan to create false data, information that looked authentic but was designed to lead the Vorthans into traps if they tried to use it. She described the patrol patterns she had invented, the supply routes that led nowhere, the communication codes that would scramble any Vorthan transmission that tried to use them. When she finished, Director Wells was typing furiously on her datapad, her expression unreadable. Admiral Chen's posture had shifted slightly, the hardness in his eyes giving way to something that might have been curiosity. "You created false intelligence," he said, "and you convinced the Vorthans it was real?" "Yes, sir." "How?" Maya thought about the question. "I spent months studying them, sir. I know how they think, how they analyze information. I made sure the false data followed the patterns they would expect to see. It was convincing because it looked exactly like the real thing." Director Wells looked up from her datapad. "Lieutenant Chen, before you gave the Vorthans this false intelligence, did you record anything from their ship? Any communications, sensor readings, anything at all?" Maya remembered the transmission she had captured while working on the station's communication array. "Yes, ma'am. I managed to tap into their frequency and record several hours of communication between their ships. I also recorded my entire interaction with their commander, including when they..." She paused, suddenly, reluctant to share this part. "Including when they gave me a title." The 3 senior officers exchanged glances. Admiral Harrison spoke for the first time since the introductions.
The survivors mentioned something about that.
They said the Vorthons called you Commander Chen.
They said you were the first human ever given a Vorthon military title. Maya nodded, feeling a flush of embarrassment.
I don't fully understand it myself, sir. The Vorthon commander said I had earned their recognition. He said I was worthy of the title.
Admiral Chen leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful.
In all my years fighting the Vorthons, he said slowly, I have never heard of them showing respect to an enemy. They view us as inferior animals to be conquered, not warriors to be honored.
And yet they honored you. It surprised me too, sir.
Director Wells tapped her datapad.
Lieutenant, I want you to transfer all the recordings you made to my department for analysis.
Everything, the communications, your interaction with the Vorthon commander, all of it.
This could be the intelligence breakthrough we've been waiting for.
Maya felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. She had expected to be treated as a criminal, not as a potential asset.
Of course, ma'am. I'll give you everything I have.
Admiral Chen stood up, and the others rose with him. Lieutenant Chen, he said, what you did was reckless, insubordinate, and completely against protocol. He paused, and, for a moment Maya braced herself for the worst. It was also one of the most extraordinary acts of leadership I've seen in 30 years of military service. Maya stared at him, unable to speak. The court-martial proceedings have been suspended, Admiral Chen continued. Pending review of the intelligence you've provided and a full debriefing, you will not face formal charges. Instead, you will be temporarily assigned to Director Wells' department, where your knowledge of Vorthon patterns and behavior will be put to use.
Sir? Maya managed. Admiral Chen's stern face softened slightly.
You saved 94 lives, Lieutenant.
You brought back intelligence that could change the course of this war.
And you did it all alone, after your own commanders refused to listen to you. He extended his hand.
Whatever happens next, you should know that you've earned my respect.
Maya shook his hand, still struggling to process what was happening.
Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Admiral Chen replied. Your work is just beginning.
The weeks that followed were the most intense of Maya's life. Director Wells' department, officially called the Bureau of Strategic Intelligence, unofficially known as the Puzzle Palace, occupied an entire floor of Starbase Delta 9. It was filled with analysts, linguists, cryptographers, and specialists in fields Maya had never even heard of. And, now, she was one of them. Her first task was to help decode the Vorthon communications she had recorded. This proved to be far more difficult than she had anticipated. The Vorthon language was unlike any human language, with grammar and syntax that seemed to operate on completely different principles. But Maya discovered that she had an unexpected advantage. Her pattern recognition skills, honed through years of logistics work, allowed her to spot regularities in the alien speech that other analysts missed. Within a week, she had made more progress on the Vorthon language than the department had made in years. This is remarkable, Director Wells said, looking over Maya's notes. You've identified what appears to be a grammatical structure that modifies based on the speaker's emotional state.
We've never seen anything like this before.
Maya shrugged, trying to downplay her achievement. I just noticed that certain sound patterns repeated when the Vorthons seemed agitated versus when they were calm.
It seemed like there might be a connection.
There is, said a voice from behind them.
An emotional connection.
Maya turned to find a tall man with graying hair and deep-set eyes standing in the doorway. He wore the casual clothes of a civilian, but his bearing suggested military background. Dr. Samuel Okonkwo, Director Wells said.
He's our expert on Vorthon psychology. Dr. Okonkwo, meet Lieutenant Chen.
The doctor stepped forward, studying Maya with obvious interest.
So you're the one who got the Vorthons to give you a title. I've been wanting to meet you.
I didn't really get them to do anything, Maya said.
They chose to honor me.
I still don't fully understand why.
Dr. Okonkwo smiled. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you. I've spent my career trying to understand how Vorthons think.
Your experience on their ship could be invaluable. Over the following days, Maya found herself spending more and more time with Dr. Okonkwo. He had a gentle manner and an insatiable curiosity, asking questions about every detail of her encounter with the Vorthan commander, what he had said, how he had moved, the tone of his voice, the reactions of the soldiers around him. The Vorthans are not like us, Dr. Okonkwo explained during one of their sessions. Their society is built on a concept we might call earned status. Every Vorthan begins life with nothing, no rank, no title, no recognition. They must earn everything through their actions. That sounds similar to human meritocracy, Maya observed. Similar, but more absolute. In human societies, people often inherit status from their families, or gain it through wealth or connections. Vorthan society doesn't work that way. Every individual must prove themselves independently. A Vorthan general's child has no more inherent standing than the child of a laborer. Maya thought about this. So when the commander gave me a title, he was recognizing you as someone who had earned status in their eyes. It's the highest compliment a Vorthan can pay. And the fact that he gave it to a human, that's unprecedented. But why? Maya pressed. I wasn't trying to impress them. I was just trying to save those people. Dr. Okonkwo nodded slowly. I think that's exactly why. The Vorthans value authenticity above all else. They can detect deception with almost supernatural accuracy. They knew you weren't trying to manipulate them or impress them. You were simply being true to yourself, doing what you believed was right regardless of the consequences. They respected that. More than respected. They honored it. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. Don't you see what this means, Lieutenant? For 10 years, we've been fighting a war against an enemy we barely understand. We've treated them as monsters, and they've treated us as vermin. But your experience suggests something different. It suggests that there might be common ground between our species after all. Maya felt the weight of his words settle over her. You think there's a possibility of peace? I think there's a possibility of understanding. Whether that leads to peace. He shrugged. That's above my pay grade. But it's a start. As Maya's work with the intelligence department continued, word of her exploits began to spread through the fleet. The story of the junior lieutenant who had single-handedly rescued 94 survivors and earned a Vorthan title made for compelling listening, especially among younger officers who felt overlooked and undervalued. She started receiving messages, first a trickle, then a flood. Officers from across the fleet wanted to talk to her, to hear her story firsthand, to understand how she had accomplished what seemed impossible. Maya tried to avoid the attention. She wasn't comfortable being held up as a hero or a role model. She had just done what needed to be done. Anyone else in her position would have done the same. But not everyone saw it that way. One evening, about a month after her arrival at Delta 9, she was working late in her office when Admiral Harrison appeared at her door. He looked older than she remembered, the lines on his face deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. "May I come in?" he asked. "Of course, sir." Harrison sat down across from her, his movements slow and deliberate. "I wanted to apologize to you, Lieutenant. When you presented your analysis at that briefing, the one about the patrol gaps, I should have listened. I should have given your ideas the consideration they deserved." Maya didn't know what to say. An apology from an admiral was the last thing she had expected. "Commander Williams might still be alive if I had," Harrison continued. "Those 12 ships, all those people." He shook his head. "I let my assumptions about you, about your age and inexperience, blind me to the value of what you were saying. That was a failure of leadership on my part. Sir, you couldn't have known, I could have known." Harrison's voice was firm. "I should have known. That's what leaders are supposed to do, see past their own biases, recognize potential in unexpected places." He looked at her with something like admiration. "You did that on Station Gamma 7. You saw potential in a situation where everyone else saw only despair. You found a way forward when there shouldn't have been one. Maya felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes.
She blinked them back, struggling to maintain her composure. "Thank you, sir. That means more to me than you know." Harrison stood up, straightening his uniform. "For what it's worth, I've recommended you for promotion. The paperwork is already in process. You should be wearing a captain's bars within the month." "Captain? It's the least you deserve.
And, between you and me," he lowered his voice, "there are people in high places who think you deserve even more.
The title the Vorthons gave you, it's causing quite a stir. Some people think it makes you uniquely valuable. Others think it makes you a security risk. What do you think, sir?" Harrison considered the question for a long moment.
"I think you're someone who's going to change things, Lieutenant.
For better or worse, the galaxy is not going to forget Maya-Chen."
He left without another word, and Maya sat alone in her office, thinking about what he had said.
The promotion came through 2 weeks later.
Maya-Chen was officially Captain Chen now, with all the rights and responsibilities that came with the rank. She was given a larger office, a bigger paycheck, and, most importantly, a greater degree of authority in her intelligence work. But, the promotion also brought new challenges. Not everyone was happy about her rapid rise through the ranks. Some officers who had spent years working toward the same position resented her success. Others questioned whether her promotion was deserved or simply a publicity stunt designed to boost morale. The criticism was usually subtle, a cold shoulder in the corridor, a whispered conversation that stopped when she entered the room. But, sometimes it was more direct. One afternoon, Maya was eating lunch in the officers' mess when a group of senior officers approached her table. Their leader was Captain Marcus Webb, a decorated war hero with 15 years of service and a reputation for speaking his mind. "Captain Chen," Webb said, his voice loud enough to carry across the room.
"Mind if we join you?" Maya looked up from her meal.
The tension in Webb's body language was obvious, and the officers behind him wore expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. "Of course," she said, keeping her voice neutral.
"Please, sit."
Webb sat down across from her, while his companions arranged themselves on either side.
It felt like an interrogation. "I've been hearing a lot about you, Chen," Webb said.
"The famous Vorthon commander. The woman who saved Station Gamma 7. The miracle worker who's going to win the war for us."
Maya said nothing.
She could hear the mockery in his words, but she wasn't going to rise to the bait. "Funny thing is," Webb continued, "I was fighting the Vorthons back when you were still in diapers. I've lost friends, colleagues, people I loved. And, in all that time, I never once got a title from the enemy. I never once got fast-tracked to captain because I did something stupid and got lucky."
"Is there a point you're trying to make, Captain Webb?"
Webb leaned forward, his eyes hard. "The point is that some of us actually earned our ranks through years of service and sacrifice. We didn't steal shuttles and fly off on unauthorized solo missions.
We followed orders. We did our duty.
And we're getting passed over for promotion by someone who's been an officer for what, 3 years?" Maya felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her voice steady.
"I understand your frustration, Captain. And you're right that I haven't served as long as you have.
But, with respect, I didn't ask for any of this. I saw people in danger, and I did what I thought was right.
If that makes me unworthy of my rank in your eyes, then I'm sorry."
Webb snorted. "Pretty words. But pretty words don't win wars.
Combat experience does.
Strategic brilliance does. Not luck and publicity stunts." Before Maya could respond, another voice cut through the tension.
"That's enough, Marcus." Maya turned to see Admiral Chen, the other Admiral Chen, the one who had been present at her initial debriefing, approaching the table.
The senior officers scrambled to their feet, saluting.
"At ease," the Admiral said. "Webb, I think you've made your point. Why don't you and your friends find somewhere else to eat?"
Webb's face reddened, but he knew better than to argue with an admiral.
"Yes, sir."
He shot Maya one last hostile look before leading his companions away.
Admiral Chen sat down in the seat Webb had vacated.
I apologize for that, Captain. Webb is a good officer, but he's also proud. Your rise has been difficult for people like him to accept.
I understand, sir. I'm not looking to make enemies.
No, but sometimes enemies find you regardless.
The Admiral studied her for a moment. I've been watching your progress with Director Wells' team. You're doing excellent work, better than anyone expected.
The Vorthan communication analysis you've been contributing to could reshape our entire intelligence framework.
Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing.
He stood up to leave, then paused.
And, Captain? Don't let people like Webb get under your skin.
They're scared of what they don't understand.
Show them that their fear is misplaced.
He walked away, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and her half-eaten lunch. The encounter with Webb bothered her more than she wanted to admit.
That night, lying in her bunk, she stared at the ceiling and wondered if he was right. Had she earned her position, or had she just gotten lucky? Was she truly deserving of the rank she held, or was she a fraud waiting to be exposed? She thought about the Vorthan commander's words, "Your rank is irrelevant. Your actions define you." Maybe that was the answer. Maybe it didn't matter how she had gotten here.
What mattered was what she did next.
The next morning, Maya threw herself into her work with renewed determination.
She spent long hours analyzing Vorthan communications, mapping patrol patterns, identifying vulnerabilities in enemy strategies. She collaborated with linguists to expand their understanding of the Vorthan language, and, with tacticians to develop new approaches to combat. And, slowly, her efforts began to pay off. 3 months after her rescue of Station Gamma 7, the United Earth Defense Force launched a major offensive in the Kepler sector. The operation was designed using intelligence that Maya had helped develop, including the false data she had fed to the Vorthans and the analysis of their communication patterns. The attack was a stunning success. Human forces exploited the gaps in Vorthan defenses that Maya had identified, striking fast and hard before the enemy could regroup. Within 48 hours, the fleet had reclaimed 3 star systems and destroyed or captured a dozen Vorthan warships. It was the biggest victory humanity had achieved in years. Maya watched the battle reports come in from her office at Delta 9, feeling a strange mixture of pride and unease. Her work had contributed to this victory, but it had also contributed to death. Vorthans had died because of her analysis, her insights, her understanding of their patterns. She thought about the commander who had honored her, the soldiers who had stood at attention as she left their ship. Were any of them among the dead? It's always complicated, isn't it? Maya looked up to find Dr. Okonkwo standing in her doorway. What do you mean? The psychologist entered her office and sat down. War. Victory. The knowledge that your success means suffering for others. He studied her face with knowing eyes. You're feeling the weight of it. Is it that obvious? To me, yes. I've seen it before, in other officers who have exceptional abilities. The better you are at your job, the more responsibility you bear for the consequences. Maya sighed. I keep thinking about that Vorthan commander. He gave me a title, treated me with honor. And now his people are dying because of what I've done. They were dying before, Dr. Okonkwo pointed out gently. On both sides. That's the nature of war. What you've done is help to bring it closer to an end. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to help you understand that your feelings are appropriate and human. He leaned forward. Maya, the Vorthans honored you because you were true to yourself. You did what you believed was right, even when it was difficult. Don't abandon that now just because the situation has become more complicated. Maya considered his words. What do you think I should do? Keep being true to yourself. Keep doing what you believe is right. And, when the time comes to make difficult choices, he spread his hands, make them with a clear conscience and accept the consequences. It was good advice, Maya thought. Whether she could follow it remained to be seen. In the weeks that followed the Kepler victory, Maya's status within the fleet changed dramatically. The officers who had once dismissed her now sought her out for advice and insights. The ones who had resented her promotion began to treat her with grudging respect. Even Captain Webb, her harshest critic, acknowledged that her work had made a difference. But Maya found herself growing uncomfortable with the attention. She wasn't interested in being a celebrity or a symbol. She just wanted to do her job and help end the war. Director Wells seemed to understand this. She increasingly shielded Maya from public appearances and media requests, allowing her to focus on what she did best, analyzing patterns and developing strategies. "You're not a propaganda tool," Wells told her during one of their regular meetings. "You're an intelligence asset. We need your mind more than we need your face." It was during one of these quiet periods of intense work that Maya made her next major breakthrough. She had been studying Vorthan fleet movements, trying to understand the logic behind their deployments, when she noticed something strange. The Vorthans were concentrating their forces in a sector far from any known human activity, a region of space that, according to all intelligence, was empty and worthless. Why would they do that, she wondered aloud. She dug deeper, cross-referencing Vorthan communications, stellar surveys, and historical records. What she found made her blood run cold. The sector the Vorthans were fortifying contained a star system with a single inhabited planet, a world called Novus Terra. It had been colonized early in humanity's expansion into space, then abandoned when the colony failed. Or so the records said. But Maya found evidence suggesting that the colony hadn't failed. It had been hidden. For reasons lost to history, the colonists had gone dark, cutting off all communication with Earth and disguising their presence from external sensors. There were people on Novus Terra. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Descendants of the original colonists, living in secrecy for generations. And the Vorthans had found them. Maya brought her discovery to Director Wells immediately. "They're going to attack," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "The Vorthans don't fortify positions for defense, they do it to stage offensives. They're preparing to wipe out an entire human colony, and no one even knows those people exist." Wells' face went pale as she reviewed Maya's analysis. "How long do we have?" "Based on their deployment patterns, weeks, maybe. A month at most. That's not enough time. The fleet is still recovering from the Kepler offensive. We don't have the resources to launch another major operation." Maya felt desperation clawing at her chest. "We have to do something. We can't just let them die." Wells was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across her screen. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with resignation. "I'll brief the Admiralty. But, Maya, you need to understand. The decision about whether to help those colonists isn't mine to make. It isn't even about resources anymore. It's about politics." "Politics?" "Think about it. A hidden colony, unknown to Earth for generations. If we acknowledge them now, we're admitting that our government lost track of its own citizens. That's embarrassing. Potentially devastating for the administration." Wells shook her head. "There are people who would rather let those colonists die than face the political consequences of saving them." Maya stared at her, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You can't be serious." "I wish I wasn't. But that's the world we live in, Captain. Welcome to the ugly side of command." The briefing went exactly as Wells had predicted. The Admiralty was divided, with some pushing for immediate action and others arguing for caution and further study. Politicians weighed in, spinning narratives and calculating risks. Days passed, then a week, and still no decision was made. Meanwhile, Vorthan forces continued to mass near Novus Terra. Maya threw herself into developing contingency plans, strategies that might give the colonists a fighting chance even if the fleet didn't arrive in time. She worked around the clock, sleeping in her office, eating at her desk, pushing herself to the edge of exhaustion. But it wasn't enough. No matter how many plans she developed, the fundamental problem remained: the colonists needed help that might never come. On the 9th day after her discovery, Maya received a message that changed everything. It came through a secure channel, encrypted with protocols she didn't recognize. When she decrypted it, she found herself looking at a face she had never expected to see again. The Vorthan commander. "Human Chen," he said, his deep voice resonating through her speakers.
"Commander Chen. We must speak." Maya's heart pounded as she responded. "How did you contact me?" "We have ways. Your communication networks are not as secure as you believe." There was no judgment in his voice, merely a statement of fact. "I bring information. Important information. About Novice Terra?"
The commander's black eyes seemed to flicker with something that might have been surprise.
"You know of this place?" "I know the Vorthans are preparing to attack it. I know there are humans living there." "Then, you understand the urgency."
The commander leaned forward.
"Commander Chen, the Vorthan Empire has authorized the complete destruction of the human settlement on Novice Terra. The operation will begin in 18 days. Maya felt her blood turn to ice. "Why are you telling me this?" The commander was silent for a long moment.
When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost contemplative. "I told you once that Vorthan Empire respects those who honor their agreements.
You honored yours. The intelligence you provided was false, yes, we know this now. But, you were honest about your intentions.
You sought to protect your people, and you did so with honor."
You're not angry about the false intelligence? Anger is inefficient.
You did what any worthy commander would do, you deceived your enemy to protect your people.
This is expected. This is respected. He paused.
What is not expected is what happened after.
I don't understand. After you left our ship, I reported your actions to Imperial Command. I expected them to issue orders for your termination. Instead, they became interested.
They began studying you, your history, your behavior, your values. And they came to a conclusion that has never been reached before about any human.
Maya held her breath. What conclusion? They concluded that you are worthy of negotiation. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Negotiation? You mean?
Peace, the commander said. The Vorthan Empire is willing to discuss the possibility of peace with your species.
But, only with you, Commander Chen.
Only you have earned enough status in our eyes to speak for humanity. Maya sat in stunned silence, her mind racing through the implications. Peace. After 10 years of war, after countless deaths on both sides, the Vorthans were offering the possibility of peace. And they wanted her to be the one to negotiate it. "Why me?" she managed at last.
"I'm just a captain. There are admirals, politicians, diplomats, people far more qualified than me. Your ranks mean nothing to us.
Your titles mean nothing. What matters is what you have proven yourself to be, a leader who acts with honor, who thinks beyond conventional boundaries, who values lives above glory." The commander's expression was unreadable, but his voice carried conviction.
You are the only human we have encountered who embodies the qualities we respect. If peace is possible, it will only come through you.
Maya thought about everything that had happened since she had stolen Shuttle 7 from the Resolute. The survivors she had saved, the intelligence she had gathered, the title she had been given. Every step had seemed impossible at the time, yet she had found a way forward. Maybe this was the next impossible step.
"If I agree to this," she said slowly, "what happens to Novice Terra?"
"The attack will be postponed." "Not cancelled, postponed. The fate of that colony will be decided at the negotiation table, along with the fate of this war." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was better than nothing. Better than watching helplessly while thousands of people died. "I need to discuss this with my superiors," Maya said.
"Of course. But time is limited. You have 3 days to decide.
After that, the opportunity will pass, and the attack on Novice Terra will proceed as planned." The commander paused. "I hope you will choose wisely, Commander Chen. For both our people's sake."
The transmission ended, and Maya sat alone in her office, staring at the blank screen. Her hands were trembling, and her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Peace. The word seemed almost impossible after so many years of war. Could she really be the one to bring it about? Did she have the right to even try? She thought about the officers who had laughed at her in that briefing room, what felt like a lifetime ago. She thought about Admiral Harrison's apology, about Captain Webb's resentment, about Dr. Okonkwo's quiet wisdom. She thought about the 94 survivors from Station Gamma 7, living their lives because she had refused to give up. And she thought about the Vorthan commander, who had looked at a junior human officer and seen something worthy of honor. Maya Chen took a deep breath and began composing a message to Director Wells. Whatever happened next, she wasn't going to face it alone. The meeting with the Admiralty was the most intense experience of Maya's life. She stood at the center of a conference room filled with the most powerful people in the United Earth Defense Force, presenting the Vorthan offer and defending her recommendation to accept it. The reactions ranged from shock to skepticism to outright hostility. "This is clearly a trap," argued Admiral Morrison, a hawk who had built his career on aggressive anti-Vorthan rhetoric. "They want to lure us into negotiations while they prepare for a devastating attack. It's exactly the kind of deception we should expect from them." "With respect, Admiral," Maya replied, "the Vorthans don't deceive. It's not part of their culture. They consider deception to be inefficient and dishonorable. So they say. But how can we trust anything they tell us? Because they've demonstrated it." Maya pulled up records of Vorthan behavior over the years of conflict. In every documented case where the Vorthans made a promise even to enemies, they kept it. Their communication about the attack on Novice Terra proves they're willing to share information that doesn't benefit them strategically. If they wanted to trap us, there are far easier ways to do it. Admiral Chen, the senior Admiral Chen who had shown her kindness, leaned forward. "Let's assume for a moment that the offer is genuine. What would negotiation even look like? What could we possibly offer the Vorthans that would make them willing to end the war?" It was a good question, and one Maya had been thinking about since the Vorthan commander's message. "From what I've learned about their culture," she said, "the Vorthans aren't interested in territory or resources the way we are. They expand because expansion is what empires do, it's how they maintain status and purpose. But if we could offer them something that served those needs without requiring conquest. Such as trade, cultural exchange, joint exploration of uncharted space." Maya spread her hands. "The Vorthans respect achievement and earn status. If we could create opportunities for them to earn status through cooperation rather than conquest, they might find that more appealing than continued war." The room erupted in argument. Some admirals dismissed her ideas as naive, while others saw potential worth exploring. Politicians worried about how peace negotiations would affect their standing with voters. Military leaders calculated the strategic implications of a ceasefire. Through it all, Maya stood firm, answering questions and defending her position with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Finally, after hours of debate, Admiral Chen called for a vote. The decision was closer than Maya had hoped, but, in the end, the Admiralty authorized her to proceed with negotiations. She was officially designated as Earth's envoy to the Vorthan Empire. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders as she left the conference room. The fate of two civilizations now rested, at least in part, on her actions. The girl who had been laughed at by her own commanders was now charged with ending a war that had claimed millions of lives. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was exactly what she had been preparing for, even if she hadn't known it at the time. Maya spent the next 2 days preparing for the journey to Vorthan space. She studied everything available about their culture, their history, their decision-making processes. She consulted with Dr. Okonkwo, whose insights into Vorthan psychology proved invaluable. She practiced negotiation scenarios, trying to anticipate every possible challenge she might face. And she said goodbye to the people who had come to matter to her. Admiral Harrison visited her quarters on the night before her departure.
He looked older than he had when she first met him, the weight of command etched into every line on his face. "I still remember that briefing," he said quietly. "When you stood up and presented your analysis, and everyone laughed. I should have listened." "You've apologized for that already, sir." "I know. But I wanted to say something else." He met her eyes directly. "I'm proud of you, Captain Chen. Whatever happens out there, know that you've already accomplished more than most people manage in a lifetime." Maya felt tears threatening to fall. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. Just come back safe. That's all I ask." Dr. Okonkwo came next, bringing a small gift, a data chip containing his complete research on Vorthan psychology. "Everything I've learned in 20 years of study," he said. "Use it wisely." "I will. And, Dr. Okonkwo, thank you for everything." The psychologist smiled warmly. "Thank me when you've brought peace. Until then, I'm just a scholar whose theories are about to be tested in the real world." Even Captain Webb sought her out, his manner awkward but sincere. "I was wrong about you, Chen. I thought you were just lucky, but you're the real thing." He extended his hand. "Give those blue bastards hell. Or peace. Whatever works." Maya shook his hand firmly. "I'll do my best." On the morning of her departure, Maya boarded the shuttle that would carry her to the rendezvous point with the Vorthan delegation. It was a larger, better-equipped vessel than the one she had stolen months ago, but she felt strangely nostalgic for that cramped, aging shuttle that had carried her to Station Gamma 7. As she lifted off from Starbase Delta 9, she looked back at the massive installation growing smaller in her viewport. Somewhere down there, people were going about their lives, unaware that one woman in a small ship was heading off to try to end a decade of war. The journey took 4 days. Maya spent most of it reviewing her notes and practicing her opening statements. She also slept, more than she had in weeks, her body finally catching up on the rest it had been denied. On the 4th day, she arrived at the rendezvous point, a neutral zone of empty space, far from any star or planet. Waiting for her were 3 Vorthan warships, their massive hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. The lead ship was the same one she had visited months ago, after her rescue of Station Gamma 7. And, standing at the edge of its docking bay, just as he had been when she left, was the Vorthan commander. Maya docked her shuttle and stepped out to meet him. The commander approached, his black eyes studying her with an intensity that would have been unsettling if she hadn't experienced it before. "Commander Chen," he said. "You came. I gave my word." The commander made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. "Yes. You did. And you honor your word. This is good." He gestured for her to follow, and together they walked into the heart of the Vorthan ship. As they moved through corridors filled with alien soldiers who watched her with curious, unblinking eyes, Maya felt the enormity of what she was attempting settle over her. She was one human, alone among enemies who had spent a decade trying to destroy her species. Everything she said and did in the coming days would be scrutinized, analyzed, judged. A single mistake could doom the negotiations and condemn thousands of colonists on Novus Terra to death. But she had faced impossible situations before. She had survived them. She had even thrived. The commander led her to a large chamber at the center of the ship. It was clearly designed for formal occasions, the ceiling soared overhead, and the walls were decorated with what Maya assumed were symbols of Vorthan achievement. At the far end of the room, seated on elevated platforms, were a dozen Vorthans in elaborate ceremonial armor. "The Imperial Council," the commander explained quietly. "The highest authority in the Vorthan Empire, second only to the Emperor himself. They will hear your words and judge your worth." Maya swallowed hard. "No pressure, then. Pressure is efficient. It reveals true character." The commander almost seemed to smile. "Show them what I saw in you, Commander Chen. Show them why you are worthy." He stepped back, leaving Maya alone at the center of the chamber, facing the assembled power of an alien civilization. For a moment, she felt the familiar flutter of fear in her chest. The voice of doubt whispered that she wasn't qualified for this, that she was just a junior officer who had gotten lucky, that the people who had laughed at her were right. Then, she remembered everything she had overcome to get here. The dismissal and mockery. The dangerous flight through enemy territory. The negotiations on Station Gamma 7. The work at the Intelligence Bureau. The debates with admirals and politicians. She had earned the right to be here. Not through rank or privilege, but through her actions. Through her choices. Through her refusal to give up when everyone told her she should. Maya Chen straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and addressed the Imperial Council of the Vorthan Empire. "I am Commander Maya Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I come not as a diplomat or a politician, but as a soldier who has seen enough death. I come to offer something that I believe both our peoples need, an end to this war." The council listened in silence as she spoke. She talked about the cost of the conflict, the lives lost on both sides, the resources consumed, the potential destroyed. She talked about her experience on Station Gamma 7, about the honor the Vorthan commander had shown her, about the respect she had developed for their culture. And she talked about the future, a future where humans and Vorthans could coexist, where the achievements of both species could be celebrated, where status could be earned through creation rather than destruction. When she finished, the chamber was silent. The council members exchanged glances, communicating in ways Maya couldn't interpret. Finally, the central figure, the eldest of the counselors, his blue skin faded to a pale gray with age, leaned forward. "You speak well, Commander Chen," he said, his voice resonating with authority. "But words are easy. The question is whether you can deliver what you promise." "I can only promise to try," Maya replied honestly. "I cannot control the decisions of my government, any more than you can guarantee the actions of every Vorthan soldier. But I can promise that I will negotiate in good faith, that I will honor any agreement we reach, and that I will do everything in my power to make peace a reality." The elder counselor studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "We will negotiate," he said. "Not because we believe peace is likely, but because Commander Thexlor has vouched for your honor." He gestured at the Vorthan commander, Thexlor, Maya now knew his name, who stood quietly at the edge of the chamber. "He has never been wrong about a warrior's worth. We will trust his judgment once more." Maya inclined her head respectfully. "Thank you, counselor. I will try to be worthy of that trust." "See that you do." The elder's black eyes seemed to bore into her soul. "The fate of your species may depend on it." The negotiations began the next day and continued for weeks. They were grueling, exhausting, and more complex than anything Maya had ever experienced. Every word had to be chosen carefully, every proposal analyzed for hidden meanings, every concession weighed against potential consequences. But, slowly, impossibly, progress was made. The Vorthans agreed to suspend their attack on Novus Terra as a gesture of good faith. In return, Maya negotiated a ceasefire along the current battle lines, giving both sides time to breathe. Trade agreements were drafted, territorial boundaries discussed, and frameworks for cultural exchange proposed. Throughout it all, Maya worked alongside Commander Thexlor, who had been assigned as her counterpart in the negotiations. She learned to read his expressions, to understand the subtle cues in his body language that indicated agreement or disagreement. And she learned more about him, about his history, his values, his hopes for his people's future. "Why did you honor me?" she asked him one evening, during a break in the negotiations. "That first time, on your ship. Why did you see something in me that no one else did?" Thexlor was quiet for a long moment. "Because you were not trying to be anything other than what you were," he said at last. "So many humans we encounter are performing, playing roles, presenting facades. You were simply yourself. A warrior protecting her people, willing to sacrifice everything for them." He turned to look at her directly. "That is the highest form of honor in Vorthan culture. To be true to oneself, regardless of cost. I wasn't trying to be honorable. I was just trying to save those people." "Yes. And that is why it was honorable. True honor is never performed. It is simply lived." Maya thought about his words for a long time after that conversation. They resonated with something deep inside her, a truth she had always known but never quite articulated. She had spent so much of her career trying to prove herself, trying to earn recognition and respect from people who would never give it. But the recognition that mattered, the recognition from Thexlor, from the survivors of Gamma 7, from Dr. Okonkwo and Admiral Harrison and all the others who truly saw her, had come not from trying to impress them, but from simply being herself. As the weeks of negotiation stretched into months, Maya began to see real hope for peace. The framework of an agreement was taking shape, not perfect, not everything either side wanted, but a foundation on which something better could be built. And then, everything fell apart. The message came from Earth, transmitted through secure channels that Maya had learned to dread. A faction within the United Earth government had decided that the negotiations were taking too long, that the terms being discussed were too favorable to the Vorthans. They had launched a surprise attack on a Vorthan supply depot, hoping to strengthen humanity's negotiating position. The attack had failed. Worse, it had killed 17 Vorthan soldiers whose deaths now threatened to unravel everything Maya had worked for. The Imperial Council was furious. Thexlor tried to argue for calm, but even his influence had limits. The Elder Counselor demanded that Maya answer for her government's betrayal. "You promised good faith," he said, his voice cold with anger. "You promised to honor agreements. And, while you spoke words of peace, your people were preparing war." "I had nothing to do with that attack," Maya said desperately. "I didn't know about it. I would never have approved it." "Then, your government cannot be trusted. If they deceive you, their own envoy, how can we believe anything they promise?" Maya had no good answer. She stood in that vast chamber, facing the accumulated wrath of an alien empire, and felt everything she had built crumbling around her. This was the moment that would define everything. The choice she made now would determine whether peace was still possible or whether the war would continue for another decade. Maya thought about what Thexlor had told her about honor. About being true to oneself, regardless of cost. "You're right," she said quietly. "My government deceived me. They undermined the negotiations I was sent to conduct. And, for that, I am truly sorry." The council waited, watching her with those unnerving black eyes. "But, I cannot control my government's actions," Maya continued. "I can only control my own. And, I choose to continue pursuing peace, even if my own people have made it harder." She took a deep breath. "I give you my word, not my government's word, but mine, that I will find out who authorized that attack. I will hold them accountable. And, I will do whatever it takes to restore the trust that has been broken." "And, why should we believe you?" the Elder Counselor demanded. Maya met his gaze directly. "Because I am Commander Chen. Because the title your people gave me means something. Because I have never broken my word to you, and I never will." The chamber fell silent. Maya could feel her heart pounding, could feel the sweat trickling down her spine. Everything hung in the balance. Finally, Thexlor stepped forward. "I will vouch for her," he said. "If she fails to keep her promise, the dishonor will fall on me as well." The Elder Counselor looked at Thexlor for a long moment, then, back at Maya. His expression was unreadable. "Very well," he said at last. "The negotiations will continue. But, understand this, Commander Chen, you have bound yourself to a promise that may cost you everything. If you fail, the consequences will be severe for you, for Thexlor, and for the hope of peace between our peoples." Maya nodded, accepting the weight of that responsibility. "I understand. And, I will not fail." She meant it with every fiber of her being. Whatever it took, whoever she had to confront, she would keep her promise. The girl who had been laughed at by her own side had just staked everything on her word, and she would not let it be broken. Maya Chen stood at the viewport of the Vorthan flagship, watching the stars whirl slowly past as the massive vessel cruised through the void. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, lay Earth and the government that had betrayed her trust. Somewhere out there were the people who had nearly destroyed everything she had worked for. She had 48 hours to find them and hold them accountable. Thexlor approached quietly, his footsteps barely audible on the metal deck. Over the months of negotiation, Maya had learned to recognize his presence even without looking, something in the way the air seemed to shift when he moved. "The Council has granted your request," he said. "A ship will take you back to human space. You will have limited time to fulfill your promise." 48 hours, Maya repeated. "That's what we agreed. It is not much time." "No. But, it's what I have." She turned to face him, searching his alien features for any sign of doubt. "Do you believe I can do this?" Thexlor considered the question carefully. "I believe you will try with everything you have. Whether that will be enough." He made a gesture that Maya had learned indicated uncertainty. "That remains to be seen. Thank you for vouching for me." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." His black eyes met hers directly. "You saved my honor when you chose to negotiate rather than fight. I saved yours in return. This is how trust is built between warriors." Maya nodded slowly. In Vorthan culture, honor was a tangible thing, something that could be given, shared, and risked. By vouching for her, Thexlor had put his own standing on the line. If she failed, they would both fall. "I won't let you down," she promised. "I know. That is why I chose to trust you." The shuttle ride back to human space felt endless. Maya spent the hours reviewing intelligence reports, trying to piece together who had authorized the attack on the Vorthan supply depot. The operation had been too sophisticated to be the work of rogue soldiers. It bore the hallmarks of careful planning and high-level approval. Someone powerful wanted the peace negotiations to fail. When she arrived at Starbase Delta 9, she was met not by the military police she had expected, but by Director Wells herself. The intelligence director looked exhausted, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. "Captain Chen," she said. "We need to talk. Privately." They retreated to Wells' secure office, passing through multiple checkpoints and security doors. Only when they were safely inside, surrounded by layers of encryption and surveillance countermeasures, did Wells finally speak freely. "The attack was ordered by Vice Admiral Reyes," she said without preamble. "He leads a faction within the military that believes the war should continue. They think peace with the Vorthans is impossible, that negotiation is just a delay before inevitable betrayal." Maya felt cold fury building in her chest. "Reyes. I've heard of him. Hardliner, decorated veteran, politically connected. Very politically connected. He has allies throughout the military and the civilian government. Bringing him down won't be easy. I don't care if it's easy. I made a promise to the Vorthan Council. I intend to keep it." Wells studied her for a long moment. "You've changed, Chen. When you first came to my department, you were talented but uncertain. Now." She shook her head slowly. "Now you sound like someone who could actually pull this off." "I've had good teachers." Maya thought of Dr. Okonkwo, of Admiral Harrison, of Thexlor and his quiet wisdom. "I've learned that leadership isn't about waiting for permission. It's about doing what needs to be done. Then, you understand what you're getting into. Reyes won't go quietly. He has resources, allies, dirt on half the people in the fleet. If you move against him, he'll fight back with everything he has. Let him." Maya felt something hard and certain crystallize inside her. "I've faced the Imperial Council of the Vorthan Empire. I've negotiated with warriors who spent a decade trying to destroy my species. I'm not afraid of one corrupt admiral." Wells actually smiled at that. "I was hoping you'd say something like that." She pulled up a secure file on her terminal. "I've been gathering evidence against Reyes for months. I never had enough to act on my own, too much political risk. But, with you backing me up, with your status as peace envoy." She trailed off meaningfully. "Tell me everything," Maya said. The next several hours were a blur of information, strategy, and planning. Maya learned that Vice Admiral Reyes had been quietly sabotaging the war effort for years, not because he wanted humanity to lose, but because he wanted the conflict to continue indefinitely. War made him powerful. Peace would make him irrelevant. The attack on the Vorthan supply depot was just the latest in a long line of provocations. He had engineered incidents designed to keep tensions high and negotiations at bay. He had allies scattered throughout the military hierarchy, officers who shared his beliefs or who owed him favors. But he had also made enemies. People who had been passed over for promotion because they advocated for peace. Officers who had lost friends to battles that never needed to be fought. Soldiers who were tired of dying for a cause that seemed to have no end. Maya realized that she wasn't alone in her fight. There was an entire network of people who wanted what she wanted: an end to the war, a chance at something better. They just needed someone to lead them. "We need to move fast," she told Wells. "I have less than 40 hours now. If I don't deliver Reyes to the Vorthans by then, the negotiations collapse." "Deliver him how?" "The Vorthans aren't going to try him in their courts." "No. But they need to see that we're serious about holding our own people accountable. They need proof that the human government can control its factions." Maya thought for a moment. "I need to arrest Reyes publicly. Make it impossible for his allies to sweep it under the rug. Show the Vorthans, and our own people, that we mean what we say." "That's a bold move." "It's the only move that has a chance of working." Wells was silent for a long moment. Then, she nodded slowly. "I'll contact the people I trust. We'll build you a coalition." "But, Maya," she used her first name for the first time since they had met, "you need to be prepared for the worst. If this goes wrong, it won't just be your career on the line. It could be your life." Maya thought about Thexlor, standing before the Imperial Council, staking his honor on her word. She thought about the survivors of Station Gamma 7, who had trusted her to save them when no one else would. She thought about the colonists on Novus Terra, whose lives hung in the balance. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm ready." The next 36 hours were the most intense of Maya's life. She moved through Starbase Delta 9 like a woman possessed, meeting with officers, gathering evidence, building her case against Vice Admiral Reyes. Some people she approached were eager to help, others were cautious, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. A few refused outright, their loyalty to the status quo stronger than their desire for peace. But enough said yes. Enough were willing to stand with her. Admiral Harrison was among the first to commit. "I told you that you were going to change things," he said when she came to him with her plan. "I just didn't expect it to happen so fast." Captain Rodriguez, the veteran who had first acknowledged her potential after the failed rescue mission, brought a dozen officers with him. "Williams would have wanted this," he said simply. "He died because people like Reyes kept pushing for more war. It's time that stopped." Even Captain Webb, her former critic, offered his support. "I still think you got lucky," he admitted with a wry smile. "But I've learned that sometimes luck is just another word for being in the right place at the right time, with the courage to act. You've got that courage, Chen. I respect it." By the time Maya was ready to move, she had assembled a coalition of nearly 50 officers, enough to carry out her plan, enough to ensure that Reyes couldn't suppress what was about to happen. She found the Vice Admiral in his private quarters, surrounded by the trappings of power and prestige he had accumulated over decades of service. He was an older man, gray-haired and stern-faced, with the bearing of someone who had never questioned his own righteousness. "Captain Chen," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The famous Vorthan commander. I've been expecting you. Then, you know why I'm here." "I can guess. You've been digging into my affairs, questioning my officers, building some kind of case against me." He laughed without humor. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I hoped you would." Maya stepped further into the room, flanked by 2 officers who had volunteered for this moment. "I wanted you to know that someone was coming for you. Someone who wasn't afraid." Reyes' eyes narrowed. "You're a fool, Chen. You think you can bring me down? I have connections in every branch of the government.
I have friends on the Admiralty Council. I have evidence, Maya interrupted. I have evidence.
Documentation of every operation you authorize to undermine the peace negotiations. Testimony from officers who participated in your schemes. Records of bribes, threats, and cover-ups. She pulled out a data chip and set it on the table between them. It's all here, Admiral. Your entire career of sabotage, laid out in black and white. Reyes stared at the chip, his face slowly draining of color.
You're bluffing. Try me.
For a long moment, no one moved. Then, Reyes reached for something under his desk, a weapon, Maya realized, a split second before her training kicked in. She was faster. Her hand caught his wrist, twisting it away from the hidden pistol. The two officers behind her moved simultaneously, restraining Reyes before he could struggle free. Vice Admiral Reyes, Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins, you are under arrest for treason, sabotage, and conspiracy to undermine the lawful government of the United Earth Federation.
You have the right to remain silent.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a military tribunal.
Reyes struggled against his captors, his face twisted with rage. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've done for this fleet?
I know exactly what you've done, Maya replied.
That's why you're being arrested.
The news of Reyes' arrest spread through the fleet like wildfire. By the time Maya escorted him to a secure holding facility, the story was already being broadcast across every communication channel in human space.
Some people reacted with shock, others with vindication.
A few of Reyes' allies tried to intervene, but they found themselves blocked at every turn by the officers Maya had recruited. She had less than 6 hours left on her deadline. Maya transmitted a secure message to the Vorthan flagship, requesting an immediate communication with the Imperial Council. When Thexlor's face appeared on her screen, she felt a wave of relief wash over her.
Commander Chen, he said. You look different. I've been busy.
Maya allowed herself a small smile.
I have news for the Council. Can you arrange a transmission?
It is already arranged.
They have been waiting.
The faces of the Imperial Council appeared on Maya's screen, the same stern, blue-skinned Vorthans who had demanded she fulfill her promise. The elder counselor leaned forward, his black eyes studying her with intense scrutiny.
Commander Chen.
Your time is nearly expired.
What have you accomplished? Maya took a deep breath.
Vice Admiral Marcus Reyes has been arrested and charged with treason. He is the officer who authorized the attack on your supply depot. He has been acting for years to undermine peace negotiations between our peoples. She transmitted the evidence she had gathered, the documents, the testimonies, the irrefutable proof of Reyes' crimes.
The council reviewed it in silence, their expressions unreadable. This evidence appears genuine, the elder counselor said at last. But evidence alone is not justice. What will happen to this traitor?
He will face a military tribunal. If found guilty, and the evidence is overwhelming, he will be stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged, and imprisoned for life.
Maya paused. I know this may not be the justice you would prefer.
In Vorthan culture, I understand that such betrayals are dealt with more decisively. But, in human society, this is the most severe punishment we can impose. The council conferred among themselves in their own language. Maya waited, her heart pounding, knowing that everything depended on their decision.
Finally, the elder counselor turned back to her.
You have kept your word, Commander Chen. You promised to hold the responsible parties accountable, and you have done so.
This is satisfactory. Maya felt the tension drain from her body. Then, the negotiations can continue? They can continue.
But, understand this, trust has been damaged.
Rebuilding it will take time and consistent action.
One demonstration of good faith is not enough to erase the harm that has been done.
I understand, Counselor. I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary. The elder counselor's expression softened slightly, or perhaps Maya was imagining it. We believe you are, Commander Chun. That is why we will continue to treat with you. But, remember, your species' future may depend on your continued commitment to honor. I will remember. You have my word. The transmission ended, and Maya slumped back in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She had done it. Against all odds, she had kept her promise and saved the negotiations. But the elder counselor was right. This was just the beginning. Rebuilding trust between two civilizations would be the work of years, maybe decades. And she would be at the center of it all. The door to her office opened, and Dr. Okonkwo entered, his face creased with a warm smile. I heard the news. The whole station is talking about what you did. I didn't do it alone, Maya said. I had help. A lot of help. True. But you were the one who had the courage to act. You were the one who put everything on the line. He sat down across from her. How do you feel? Maya considered the question. Tired. Relieved. A little scared, honestly. The council made it clear that this is just the beginning. There's still so much work to do. There always is. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward. But you've proven something today, Maya. Not just to the Vorthans, or to the fleet, or to the politicians. You've proven it to yourself. Proven what? That you belong here. That you've earned your place. That the girl who was laughed at in that briefing room has become someone truly remarkable. Maya felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, but one escaped and rolled down her cheek. I don't feel remarkable. I just feel like someone who's been doing what needed to be done. That's exactly what makes you remarkable. Dr. Okonkwo smiled gently. Most people wait for others to act. They make excuses, find reasons why they can't be the one to step forward. You never did that. From the moment you stole that shuttle to save Station Gamma 7, you've been leading by example. People follow you because you give them hope. Maya thought about his words as he left her office. Hope. It was such a simple thing, yet it had driven everything she had accomplished. Hope that the survivors of Gamma 7 could be saved. Hope that peace with the Vorthans was possible. Hope that the war could end and something better could take its place. She had carried that hope through every obstacle, every setback, every moment of doubt. And, somehow, impossibly, she had brought others along with her. The negotiations resumed 3 days later. Maya returned to the Vorthan flagship, where Thexlor met her at the docking bay with something that might have been a smile. You did well, Commander Chen, he said. The council is impressed. They do not admit it openly, but I can see it in the way they speak of you. I hope I can continue to impress them. We still have a long way to go. Yes. But the hardest step is always the first. You have taken that step. The rest will follow. They walked together through the corridors of the massive ship, passing Vorthan soldiers who no longer watched Maya with suspicion but with something approaching curiosity. She was a known quantity now, the human commander who had kept her word, who had proven herself worthy of their respect. The negotiations that followed were grueling but productive. With Reyes removed and his faction in disarray, the human government was finally able to negotiate in genuine good faith. Trade agreements were finalized. Territorial boundaries were established. Protocols for cultural exchange were developed. And, most importantly, the colonists on Novus Terra were saved. Maya traveled to the hidden world herself, part of a joint human Vorthan delegation sent to make contact with the descendants of the original settlers. She stood on alien soil under an alien sky and watched as families who had lived in fear for generations learned that they were no longer alone. You saved us, said the colony's leader, an elderly woman whose ancestors had fled Earth centuries ago. We didn't even know anyone was looking for us. I found you by accident, Maya admitted. But saving you was deliberate. No human should be abandoned. No matter how far from home they are. The woman embraced her, tears streaming down her weathered face. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on us.
As Maya held her, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The briefing room where she had been laughed at. The stolen shuttle and the dangerous flight through enemy territory. The survivors of Station Gamma 7, huddled in the darkness, waiting for help that almost never came. The Vorthan commander who had seen something in her that no one else would acknowledge. She had been dismissed and doubted at every turn. But she had kept moving forward, kept believing that she could make a difference. And now, standing on a world that had almost been destroyed, she knew that her belief had been justified. The peace treaty was signed 6 months later, in a ceremony broadcast across both human and Vorthan space. Maya stood beside Thexlor as representatives from both civilizations exchanged formal pledges of cooperation and mutual respect. A new era begins today, the Elder Counselor announced. For the first time in our history, the Vorthan Empire recognizes a human not as an enemy, but as an equal. Commander Maya Chen has shown us that your species is capable of honor, of courage, of wisdom. It is our hope that she is the first of many. Maya stepped forward to address the assembled dignitaries. She looked out at the faces before her, human and Vorthan, former enemies now bound by a fragile peace, and felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. When I was a junior lieutenant, she began, I was laughed at by my own commanders. They dismissed my ideas as naive, my analysis as fantasy. They told me to stay in my place and stop trying to change things. She paused, letting her words sink in. I didn't listen. Not because I thought I was smarter than them, or braver, or better. I didn't listen because I saw people in danger, and I knew I had to help them. I didn't listen because I believed peace was possible, even when everyone around me said it wasn't. She turned to look at Thexlor, who stood quietly at her side. The Vorthans taught me something important. They taught me that honor isn't about rank or title or the approval of others. It's about being true to yourself. It's about doing what you believe is right, regardless of the consequences. She faced the crowd again. Today, we take the first step toward a future that most people thought was impossible. There will be challenges ahead. There will be setbacks and disappointments. There will be people on both sides who don't believe peace can last. Her voice grew stronger. But I believe it can. I believe that if we commit ourselves to understanding each other, to treating each other with respect and dignity, we can build something that neither of our civilizations has ever achieved alone. She spread her hands. I was laughed at by my own side. I was named commander by the enemy. And, standing here today, I can honestly say that both of those things made me who I am. The doubt made me stronger. The honor made me wiser. And, together, they taught me that anyone can change the course of history. All they have to do is believe that change is possible, and have the courage to fight for it. The ceremony concluded with the signing of the treaty. Maya added her signature alongside Thexlor's, watching as the document that would reshape the galaxy took its final form. When it was done, Thexlor turned to her with an expression she had learned to recognize as deep respect. You have done what no human has ever done before, Commander Chen. You have bridged two worlds. Maya smiled, feeling a peace she had never known before. I had help. From you, from the survivors I saved, from everyone who believed in what we were trying to accomplish. That is what makes a true leader. Not acting alone, but inspiring others to act with you. Thexlor extended his hand, a human gesture he had learned specifically for this moment. It has been an honor to know you, Maya Chen. She took his hand and shook it firmly. The honor has been mine, Commander Thexlor. In the years that followed, Maya Chen became a legend, the woman who had ended a war, bridged two civilizations, and proven that change was possible even when it seemed impossible. She served as the first human ambassador to the Vorthan Empire, working tirelessly to strengthen the bonds between their peoples. She never forgot where she came from. The young officer who had been dismissed and doubted remained with her always, a reminder of how far she had traveled and how much she had overcome. Sometimes, late at night, she would stand at a viewport and look out at the stars. She would think about Station Gamma 7 and the people she had saved there. She would think about Thexlor and the unlikely friendship that had grown between them. She would think about all the lives that had been touched by her choices. And she would remember that it had all started with a single decision, the decision to act when everyone else said it couldn't be done. On the 10th anniversary of the peace treaty, Maya received a message from the Vorthan Imperial Council. They had created a new title in her honor, Bridge Builder, a designation that would be awarded to individuals from either species who demonstrated exceptional commitment to understanding between their peoples. Maya was the first recipient. At the ceremony, the elder counselor, now older still, his gray-blue skin marked by the passage of time, spoke directly to her. When you first came before us, Commander Chen, you were one small human in a vast chamber of enemies. You had every reason to be afraid, and yet you stood firm. You spoke with honesty, negotiated with integrity, and kept every promise you made. He paused, his black eyes meeting hers. In all the centuries of the Vorthan Empire, we have never encountered anyone quite like you. You showed us that we had been wrong about your species, wrong to dismiss you as unworthy of respect. Because of you, we learned to see humans differently. Because of you, millions of lives on both sides were saved. He reached out and placed a medal around her neck, a pendant bearing symbols that Maya recognized as representing honor, wisdom, and courage. You will be remembered, Commander Chen. Long after you are gone, your name will endure. The Bridge Builder. The one who saw possibility where others saw only war. Maya accepted the medal with humility and grace. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the struggles and sacrifices, all the doubts and triumphs. She thought about the girl who had been laughed at in that briefing room so many years ago. The girl who had refused to give up, who had stolen a shuttle and flown into enemy territory, who had saved 94 lives and changed the course of history. That girl had become something more than she ever imagined. Not because she was special or chosen or destined for greatness, but because she had made a choice, the choice to act, the choice to believe, the choice to keep fighting even when everyone told her it was hopeless. Anyone could make that choice. That was what Maya had learned. Anyone could change the world. They just had to have the courage to try. As she left the ceremony, surrounded by humans and Vorthans who had gathered to celebrate her achievements, Maya Chen looked up at the stars and smiled. The universe was vast and full of possibilities. And, somewhere out there, she knew, another young officer was being told that their ideas were worthless, their dreams were foolish, their hopes were naive. Maybe, just maybe, they would refuse to listen too. And, maybe, like her, they would prove everyone wrong. The story of Commander Maya Chen, the woman who was laughed off by her own side and named by the enemy, would be told for generations. It would inspire countless others to believe that change was possible, that courage mattered, that one person could make a difference. It was a story of hope. A story of honor. A story of humanity at its best. And it was only the beginning.